Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I know there are many other events in Brussels today, so I really appreciate you joining so early. Great to see some familiar faces as well. For those who don't know us, so my name is Eline Chivot. I'm an analyst at the Center for Data Innovation. We're an independent, non-partisan think tank based in DC and Brussels, and here I cover digital policy at EU level. And today we are going to discuss what can the European Union do to embrace AI-powered manufacturing. Because indeed AI in manufacturing is an area where Europe holds many assets and definitely can nurture competitive advantage a little further. You have industry that is ongoing profound transformation, is trying to really seize AI as an opportunity. But also in policy making, a few things are happening. At EU level, you have, of course, the work of the Commission with the high-level expert group on AI. And you also have the upcoming proposals that we're all expecting, the AI white paper, the data strategy, and the industrial strategy, among others. So we're all excited about that these days. And now our session today will explore the opportunities and the benefits of an AI-powered manufacturing industry, and how can Europe really ensure its competitiveness in this sector in the context of the global race that it is not currently winning. So what are the best conditions and policies for a robust development and use of AI in manufacturing in Europe? What may be some of the barriers and the drivers behind that progress, including in terms of regulatory terms, but also in terms of unlocking investments, in terms of data sharing, in terms of skills and workforce transition and infrastructure. So we're going to discuss all that, hopefully, at least some of that today. We have an hour and a half with our very special panelists here today. Thank you for joining us. So this is Robert Atkinson, President of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation. Dana Eleftheriadou will join us, and she is the Head of Advanced Technologies team at the European Commission's DG GROW. Dario Rea, Director of Research and Innovation at IMA Group. Thank you very much, coming all the way from Italy. And Francesca Stevens, Director Government Affairs and Business Development at Arconic Europe. Thank you all very much for coming here today. We're going to start the event with a 15 minutes presentation by Dario, who will offer opening remarks, and then we will dive into the discussion. And as usual, I will keep about 15 to 20 minutes for questions and answers from you all, so please make sure you have your questions ready. So Dario, the floor is yours. I look forward to hearing your remarks.
Okay, so thank you for the invitation, thank you for everything. I try to say what we are doing from the point of view of industry. Yes, first, for the first, I would like to start with giving a few words about IMA. IMA is an acronym, is name automatic machine, so we are an Italian company that is in the stock exchange. We are in the area of Bologna, we can say Ferrari, Ducati, so in the area of mechanics, we can say in Italy. We were founded in 61 of last century. We are in the stock exchange, so we are a public company since the 1995. Up to now, the company has around, because we continue to invest in new company, we have 45 manufacturing plants all over the world. 5 are in US, other 3 are in Switzerland. We have in Germany, Italy, in China, in Malaysia. So we have many manufacturing plants all over the world. We have around 6,000 employees, where the 50% is abroad, with a turnover last year that was around 1.6 billion. 1.6 billion without recurrent revenue. So every year we start to sell a new machine. We can say that every year we sell around 3,000 machines. The sector, because we work in niches, small niches. Every niche has a turnover that is around 200 million. We can say that the bigger 3 niches are on pharma. So we provide all the equipment for farmers. So we produce machine for packaging. So we have the machine for liquid filling in sterile condition, for tablet press, capsule filling, for granulation, etc., etc. Plus we have a machine for food, tea, coffee, cheese. We have machine for packaging, like we have a company in Ilapac for horizontal form fill and seal and vertical form fill and seal. Plus we have the assembling of parts, so medical device, for example. And the last acquisition of last year was a company in Tuscany that produce manufacturing plant for electrical motor for car. So it's assembly, so it's in direction. So we can say that we create manufacturing plant, and I can say that the 90% of the plant that we're going to sell are unique. So are personalized, so for that reason we need, we have a bigger part of our job that is created by mechanical and electrical design. So that is the some years ago we started the journey to the digitalization. So here today we are here to talk about artificial intelligence, but artificial intelligence is just a tool, is a general purpose technology that can have an effect in all the branches of the human being, but is a tool. So the point are the data. So here we are in the place of the data. So where are the data? Where are the manufacturing data? It's a question if you know where are, because usually we use a lot of data, but we throw away. So the first point is we have to create the condition to store this data and to create value by those data. When you have a database, when you have a data lake, you can use artificial intelligence. So that is the first problem. Create the condition to use the data, to have the data. That is not easy because catch the data from the machine is not so easy. So in general we can say, like I read the ITF report about the manufacturing evolution, that is very interesting, but because it creates a real picture of what the factory are doing, what the company are doing. So for our company, the digitalization is a change of mindset. So we are machine builder, but we have to talk about data. So you cannot imagine every time that I go to talk with my CEO about of data is something that is not so exciting, because it's a change of mindset. We are machine builder, but we have to talk about data. So that is the first. Data can be many. The focus of IMA up to now are the manufacturing data. So the idea that having the capability to catch the data of manufacturing, we can create value. We can create machine that self-adapting. We can create machine with an higher quality. We can increase the asset intensity. We can cover the gap in the manufacturing, because all the company we still working with, all the multinational, that in Europe has the problem of find employees, find people that want to work in front of the machines. So in reality we have a lack of people on the repetitive task, and the idea is to reduce. So we need manufacturing plant that are, we can say, smart, in future will be autonomous, in direction to move also all the tasks that now are made manually, are repetitive tasks where it's difficult to find the people, to move this task at another level, permitting to the company to have employees with a different skill, with a higher skill. So that is the direction of the manufacturing. Yes, up to now I talk about that. One of the points that we have to consider in future is to create the condition to share the data. So one of the points when I talk with the customer is the fact that they don't want, usually they don't want to share the data. So we still now create the condition to sharing the data, because as that we are the machine manufacturer, we can monitor the machine condition better than the other. So that is very important. Share the manufacturing data involve also the concept of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is one of the higher barriers that we have to overcome. We had already many plants in Europe that was blocked by cyber attack. So that should be a problem, especially considering the future where, for example, artificial intelligence or software that are on cloud can control machines. So that is a barrier that we have to consider. So that is the general picture about the level of evolution. That is a level of evolution in manufacturing that, like I said before, when you talk about data, is also a different view of the business, because up to now machines are delivered. When we have machines that are delivered, we lose the life of the machine. In reality, with the connectivity, with the digitalization, we create the condition to know what's happening in the machine during the life that is normal, is quite long, that could be 30, 40 years. And so that could be a big value to increase the capacity of the future machine. So that is very important, but it needs an organization that permits to catch value from those data. So considering all of this, now I wanted to say a few things about artificial intelligence. So when you have the data, you can start to catch information from the data. It's here that I said before that around the 90% of our machines are unique, are designed for a particular product. When you look at car industry, they produce millions of motors, the same motor. So they can have experience, they know, we can say everything. In our business, instead, the manufacturing plant, that could be a freeze dry, that could be a packaging machine, if it's unique, we need to create an expertise that needs time. So the idea to have the connectivity, so to have a data lake, permit to use artificial intelligence to make the monitoring of the functioning of the machine. So on this subject, we still working with many companies. The difficulty is sharing data, but we still starting to work to analyze the data, and we have already some case where we can demonstrate an increase of efficiency, a reduction of wastage, and an increase of quality. That is very important. Other field where we are using artificial intelligence are, for example, the generative design. we're still testing some software that is linked to the additive manufacturing. That is could be another technology that up to now is too expensive. But we know that in the US there are many startups that are still working on that. We are also part of one of that. In generative design, the idea is to put beside to a mechanical designer, to put beside the capacity, the high performance computing, cloud, and the artificial intelligence can give you some different solution where the mechanical design can decide what is the best. So here we still using software from US, we use Autodesk and PTC. Plus, for artificial intelligence, we're still working on trying to create different system to control machine that are that will be more data driven. I saw in US in another startup from San Francisco, for example, a system that for the picking of the stuff that has an auto learning that is made by artificial intelligence. So the operator have just to push a button, and the machine itself learn. So that is a future that is very interesting also for us because it permits to use software that can create software. It's a change of mindset. So that is, we can say that in our field we are going to have many new technology that are based many, I can say, many solutions that we can use to improve our day-by-day job that are based on artificial intelligence. So that is important that we can say our company in Europe can use this technology that are the state of the art of the technology that are permitting to create a product with more added value in direction to have self-adaptive machine or autonomous machine. So that is the future where we have to work. So I think, so I don't know because the subject, I think that is quite big. I think that I talked more about data than artificial intelligence, but like I said before, data are the basic. Without the data, one of the points, when you create a neural network, you create this network from a database. But once you create the network, you cannot recognize from when it was created. So it's important. Means that if you give data to everyone can create maybe a business, can create something, and that can be useful, and who own the data has not the advantage to have the data. In reality, I think that here in Europe, also in the US, we have to create the condition to create a database, and with this database create an improvement of the manufacturing capacity in our country. That is the opportunity. I think that is all.
Dario, you just want to mention, like for 2 minutes, your experience with US startups?
Yes, the experience with US startup, I think that the first impression, especially in Boston, is how easy is met people. In Europe, if you want to meet a CEO of a company, it could be, there is a long line because yes, it's a tradition. So in US, met people is an opportunity. not a lose of time. The idea, US are very high level, I think also in Europe, but they have the capability to bring on in the market because they have the capability to invest venture capital, but also people that like to do this job and invest in company. For example, in November, in December, I met a company, very interesting. The idea was of the New York University. No one, in 2017, no one give the fund, the seed. In reality, one guy, the CEO, at all my age, put the money. After 1 year, the company was made already 1 million of turnover. Last year, 2 million. Second round, 27 million given by all the all the bigger manufacturing car all over the world. So they invest in idea. So we can say in idea, and for IMA we have the share of one company in additive manufacturing for plastic. That is a new idea, a spin out of MIT. Another company on continuous pharmaceutical. It's clear that the journey is not so short, but is need here, but there is the capacity to attract talent. Another thing is strange in Boston. It's very expensive to have a company there, but everyone wants to go there to catch the talent. That is the difference. Here is different because when you talk with a university, you talk with a professor. There you talk with a talent, young, very young, usually 25 years, so it's different. You talk with a brilliant mind that has an idea. It's clear that this idea has some risk, but he has the capability to bring on the market. So that is a completely different way to work, good idea, and the capacity to bring on the market quite easy. So the expertise, our experience is very interesting because we don't have venture capital. So the idea is to create a strategic collaboration. Also, in the case of the company for additive manufacturing, we give the seed, 1 million, and with the idea to bring on the market something new.
Thank you very much for your remarks. I wanted to bring it back to the bigger picture first, asking you, Francesca, your reactions, but also starting where, why it is important for Europe really to develop and use more AI in manufacturing, and what are the consequences of potentially not doing so, but also how your organization is implementing AI itself, and if you dare share some of the problems, the obstacles, in terms of the use of data, the possibility to share data, skills. I'm wondering how your organization is looking at those things.
Thank you, Lynn. And it's fascinating because clearly there was a lot of what Dario said that resonates very much with us. Arconic is a company that provides metal solutions and technologies for a bunch set of industries, in particular aerospace, transportation, building, and many others. So perhaps as a lobbyist in this town, I think I get very often an astonished look when I say that one of the topics I'm working on is digitalization. And people ask me why. And so there is a big disconnect between digital and manufacturing, and why digital policies and regulatory development are important for manufacturing. Which I think, I will talk perhaps a little bit more about that later, but I think it's one of the main issues that needs to be tackled both by companies and by the policymaker. Clearly, digitalization and automation and AI are very important for any manufacturer players, are important to make sure that we stay competitive. in a global market, that we are able to adapt to the demand also of our supply chain, and improve our own internal processes. So I mentioned one of the big sector where we operate is the aerospace world, and we are, for example, collaborating with our big customers. Airbus has launched a project a couple of years ago for an open platform to share data called Skywise, and you know, we as well as many other players in the supply chain are participating in the project. So that's just a small example to show how important it is for the organization to embrace this change, and to adapt also the process. Clearly, it's also very important that I already mentioned some aspects of, you know, why do you want to make better use of the data, because I think you very rightly pointed out that the important element is still the data and how you use them, what you do with this data, how fast you can access the data, how people can understand the data that they have in front of them, in order then to have a successful artificial intelligence strategy. Improving the data, the quality control, for example, at the operation, reducing your energy consumption, all of that can be achieved with a better use of data. And again, we go back to making, bringing more value add to your products and to your customers, therefore, and being more competitive on the global market. So that's certainly, say, to answer your question, Eileen, you know, why is important? I think you cannot do without, and I think we need to do a lot more. We, as you know, manufacturing industry, to be able to really reap the benefits of what this transformation can bring. So it is a massive challenge, but it is important to, you know, to grasp it.
I think your organization has done a few initiatives when it comes to skills. I think maybe you can briefly mention that example.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, the change is massive, and I would say, you know, clearly there is the technology, there is the organization, and there is the people. And I would say that the people is the key element in the process, because you can put all the technology you want in place, all the organizational change you want, but if the people are not following you, then you're failing. And yeah, the example, for example, one of our leading site in Germany, which where we really rolled out automation, we felt that things were not improving in terms of productivity, and tried to understand why that was the case. And we really understood that the main issues were that there was a strong element of fear from the employees, and we had basically to go back to the drawing board and restart everything from scratch, which meant really communicating, making the process a lot more transparent, and especially then put in place a training scheme for the workforce. We actually didn't force people to do the training, but we made it very open, and people that wanted to be part of the training. And was I would say perhaps an anecdote. You know, we had one of our workers in his 50s who was very reluctant and, you know, could not understand all of this thing, didn't really want to be part of it, and then eventually decided to try, to give it a try, and by the end of it, he was actually saying, I can't believe that I didn't want to do this. In fact, you know, I'm in my 50s and you're offering me a possibility to train again, and you know, you see value in me, to put money and do that. We also, for example, at the site, created like a transparent box, yeah, in the middle of the plant, on the shop floor, where the training actually happens. And again, it's just, you might think it's just comms or marketing, but actually it's very important, because people see it. They're on the shop floor and they see where the training is happening. So that really took away, I would say, the fear element, as it had you know, a massive impact in terms of really bringing the employee along the journey of the transformation, which is key. Other aspects are, of course, also changing the management mindset, and you need managers that are flexible, that can lead teams without knowing themselves where they're gonna lead them towards, because it's a new path, so everything is new for everyone. So you need to be much more agile in the way you operate. So that's a change that we've started, but really it's still on the way.
Thank you. So you mentioned that there's a lot industry still can do, there's a lot of that industry is doing, there's also a lot of unpreparedness, and I'd like to, before we continue on what kind of conditions and policies could enable progress, I'd like to turn to you, Rob, and mention your recent report, The Manufacturing Evolution, How AI Will Transform Manufacturing and the Workforce of the Future, in which you mentioned that few US manufacturers have mapped where AI opportunities exist, and few developed a clear strategy for sourcing the data that AI requires, and actually only 56% of companies 56% of companies currently have no plans even to develop, to look into that. So why is that, and how to turn that around? And secondly, if this is in the US, what is the situation in Europe, and where does Europe stand when it comes to AI manufacturing, and what kind of lessons can we get perhaps from all that? Thanks.
Sure. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. ITIF wrote a report last year where we surveyed over 100 CIOs from manufacturing companies in the US from $1 billion to $10 billion in sales. So for us, those are mid-sized companies. Not the biggest companies, obviously not small. And it's the glass half empty or half full. So 56% of companies weren't looking really at AI. But then when you say, well, you ask them, where are you going to be in 5 years? That number goes down to 23%. So part of this, the same thing with, are you deploying AI currently? 5% are. In 5 years, 28% are expected to do that, and 54% are expected to be actively engaged in trying to figure it out. So part of that is just, I think probably the least data that we've looked at internationally. We did a joint study with a Korean think tank where we looked at U.S. and Korean AI in manufacturing, and we're sort of at the same place. If I had, again, just looking at scattered data, I have to say I think the Germans are probably ahead of everybody. When you look at German data, you see what people talk about, and this is a 5-stage journey, sort of the first stage being just computerization, the last stage being you really, as Dario was alluding to, the machines really start to do a lot more on their own. They adapt. That's the ultimate phase. Very few people are at that phase, but the Germans seem to be a little bit farther along, I think. But I think that the point here is that when we surveyed all these CIOs, and there's an enormous amount of excitement, and Dario, to your point about management, one of the interesting things is at least the top management in these companies, unless they're lying, which is possible, they say they are interested, they say they get it. But they're not quite, part of it is they're not quite sure what to do. I mean, we asked them what are the big barriers and the biggest barrier was exactly what you talked about, Dario, was lack of data resources needed to enable AI solutions. That was the biggest barrier, 56% of the companies. The second one was uncertainty of how to implement those solutions. So even if you have data, what do you do? Where do you start? Do you partner with other people? How do you deal with your suppliers and your customers? And then the third most important one was a lack of workforce skills, which Francesca, you talked about as well. And that's particularly in frontline workers. Most of the companies said their engineers are, okay, they're kind of figuring that out, but it's the frontline workers who are going to really need to implement these solutions. That's where at least U.S. companies felt was one of the biggest barriers.
Oh, thank you very much. I was just curious to talk a little bit about what Europe can do, but then maybe Dana, this is where you can definitely share your insights. So there is maybe skepticism or fear coming from people in general when confronted with change, but isn't there maybe skepticism on the side of policymakers perhaps, or if not, then how is the European Commission working to create the right conditions to harness AI in manufacturing? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eileen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here today, and thank you for inviting me. Well, I have some good news. Actually, in the Commission there is no skepticism. I would say that there is a new level of optimism, but also matched with pragmatism and realism about what is possible and what is premature at the moment. So a lot has been happening in this area. Before I'm going to give you in a moment the political framework and what is actually in preparation. I cannot talk very much about that because it will be announced in the next couple of weeks. But what is the overall umbrella is that there is a renewed, as I said, optimism and will to build on the European strengths. I believe we spent enough time to lament why the big tech companies are not in Europe and why we're always lagging behind and why the one and why the other, looking especially on the US side. And then, more and more people, including our new commissioner, Thierry Breton, they are believers on the European strengths, which are different from the US strengths and the Chinese strengths, but which we can build upon to create our future. And especially among the European strengths is the manufacturing industry. We are world leaders in the manufacturing industry. And we believe that we should retain this leading position, and we believe that we should build upon that. And I will not repeat what my previous colleagues completely covered on the value of data. This is a key asset, and there is also a key potential for the European Union. Because the next wave of data that we are going to build and train the new AI systems, there will be the non-personal data, not the consumer's data while the big tech companies are building their expertise, but very much the industrial data, the data that are being collected by sensors and machines, and where because of the industrial might in Europe, we can be in the leading role of collecting and of exploiting this data, the industrial data again. For the time being, only 1% of this data that are being collected, the non-personal data, are being used and exploited in order to lead to intelligence for business to do business. So there is a huge potential there that we plan to address. So how we plan to address? There is a new commission as of the 1st of December, as you all know. This new commission put very clear political priorities, and I would say among the top three are the European Green Deal, so we are going for a greener future, and this will impact a lot the manufacturing industry. But in the same time, we go for an economy that works for people, so we are trying to reinvent the economic model that is happening through the years and to reschedule that in order to work better for people, because we have seen through the last horrible economic crisis this was not always the case. And third priority, a Europe that fits in the digital age. To my experience, and I have the credibility that I have a lot of experience in the European Commission, it is the first time that technological priorities at equal level with the economic and other political priorities. So the will is there, the commitment is there, and we are delivering. The European Green Deal has already been adopted in December. That was the third deliverable of this Commission. But in 2 weeks' time, on the 19th of February, we expect the new digital package. And the new digital package will include the AI white paper, a white paper for artificial intelligence, together with a data strategy. A lot of your issues that you mentioned there, I can only reassure that we are fully aware, we are working together with industry, with academia to see how we can unleash the power of data, because we are fully aware that this is the case. On the other hand, there are, of course, vested interest in this area. There are the large corporates, there are the small and medium enterprises who are in a much worse position, and especially coming to access to data, it is not easy for them. So I cannot disclose, unfortunately, more, because the communications will only be published on the 19th of February, so please stay tuned, because there will be ideas about how we'll go along the data issues, especially the idea of data spaces, and data space for manufacturing will be announced then. This I can say it was already announced before, and how we create them, this will be there. We're working on that. On the artificial intelligence white paper, again, it will be a white paper, not a communication as we usually have in the Commission. We already have 3 in the last 2 years. because we want actually to consult with industry, to consult with people, to consult on what would be the most effective way to go through in artificial intelligence in Europe. And one of the concerns, I believe you have raised all the issues, data, skills, finance as well, are the main barriers. But it's also the acceptance by the society. And according to our research, we have worked with McKinsey, it's work ongoing on a number of issues that focus on small and medium enterprises and the impediments for especially small and medium enterprises in AI. But what we have found out is that, for one, people, especially the smaller enterprises, do not understand exactly the potential of AI. They understand it's something big, but how exactly is this relevant for them? So a lack of knowledge, then a lack of skills and resources on how to implement that. But also fear, as you mentioned, from the employer side. Will the robots take my job? Will AI take my job? So overall, there is about 70% of people that are quite negative or are afraid of these developments. And this is something that needs to be addressed very quickly, because you cannot have progress if you have to fight all the time against negative feelings and fear, actually, by the people that will be affected. So we need to work, and we are committed to work also on this side. And then, this will be then coming back to the political framework. The first package will be on the 19th of February, and then another bigger package is coming in on 10th of March, and this will be the industrial package. So then we will have an industrial strategy packaged with an SME strategy for small enterprises and with a circular economy action plan. And then 1 week later, we will have the new European skills agenda. So we will be delivering in the coming weeks. My colleagues are very, very busy. We are all very busy with that, because they are all linked, of course. You can imagine that the industrial strategy will be heavily based on the artificial intelligence strategy, and there will be a cross-reference. Of course, there will be some more elements that I would like to mention because they concern the manufacturing sector, and those are, we are changing a little bit our view concerning sectors. You know, for years and years we were speaking about manufacturing sector or textile sector, or, you know, we're going by sector approach. Now, especially with technology, we see that sectors are more and more intertwined, and the one is supporting the other. So the new language will be very much about new strategic value chains. And in the value chains, of course, you will have sectors. So, for example, we are speaking about the value chain of future mobility. The automotive industry will be an important part of this value chain, but it will be completed by other parts, like the mobility services, for example. And there, the same will be true for smart health, for example, which will be another strategic value chain. And there, data and artificial intelligence will be even more relevant, because you will be able to combine data not only from a sector but along the strategic value chain and make them more meaningful then, make the exploitation much more meaningful for the whole development of value chain. That's all I can disclose right now. Stay tuned, there will be a lot in the coming weeks. But may I take the opportunity to make a little announcement as well for our conference on the 19th of February, which is the day that the big digital package will be adopted. We're also holding a conference, actually it's on the 18th and 19th of February, on AI, artificial intelligence for small and medium enterprises. It will be focusing on 3 strategic value chains. One is future mobility, the other is smart health, and the third is industrial data, industrial Internet of Things. So if you are around, please Google that. I will be happy to share the link as well, and don't miss the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can include it in the email I will send you all when the video is online with the recap. Thank you for mentioning all these initiatives, and it's I think one of the things I've heard you say in another event was that only 10% of small and medium enterprises in Europe are using big data analytics. For bigger firms it's 24%, so we're definitely not there yet.
No.
And what you've mentioned, those strategic value chains, I think they're you made a reference to these important common projects of European interest, IPCEIs, and indeed those 3 in particular out of 6 smart health IoT and mobility are those that are most relevant for European SMEs, I believe. Is that,
Yeah, thank you, Ellen, for referring to that. I wouldn't say that they are the most relevant for SMEs, but according to our research, they would be the most affected by artificial intelligence. The other three strategic value chains in the making right now, they are hydrogen, so very much about green, low emission industry or low energy industry, and cybersecurity. Of course, they're all equally important. And perhaps a few words about what are the important projects of common European interest in case that the audience is not very familiar. Those are new instruments. They have been adopted and approved by the Commission in 2014, but only last year we had two important projects of common European interest to start. Those are big investments that are being done in collaboration with member states and industry, and it's practically an exclusion from state aid rule in order to do something really big that is very strategic for Europe. So as I said, we have two that started, one in microelectronics and one on batteries, because we consider those areas very important for Europe. There is big budget involved in the microelectronics one, for example. There was 1.7 billion committed by 3 member states, and this will be topped up by industrial investments as well. On the second one that was adopted only in December 2019 on batteries, there is 3.2 billion committed by seven member states are involved, much more industrial players, including small enterprises, and this will be topped up with another 5 billion by industry. So we are talking for this order of magnitude. And the other 6 that I mentioned, they are ongoing now, so we see what other areas may be strategic in Europe, and those are the ones I mentioned. A lot of potential, of course, for artificial intelligence in connection with data to dynamize and mobilize these areas.
thank you. I'd like a reaction from you, Dario and Francesca, as well, when it comes to those policies and regulations and initiatives that you think would make sense, but also how are you looking at what the Commission is doing, what Europe is doing? Is that helpful in your journey? What are your thoughts on those?
Well, I think that the strategy of the European community is very important, because the direction is also a push for the innovation in the company, so the capability to have fund, because a lot of these applications are, we can say, maybe they can bring and improve in the company, but is in any case an investment. When we talk about artificial intelligence in our company, manufacturing company, the first problem is to find the people, not because we don't have graduate people, but in reality it's not attractive for them. So that is one of the big problem. Second point, need a big investment, need a moving, need create new figure. Talk about that, like I said before, means a different organization, means people that look at all the life of the machine create value. So it's clear that have the capability to have some fund, like we use it, like IMA company, we participate to regional, country and European project, so that is important. I think that we have to push up a little bit faster, because looking at the US, it's possible to see that also create innovation is faster. It's clear that here with the project Horizon 2020, we can involve a lot of research center, etc., but need time. Our European community is quite fast, but we have to present, we have to participate to a call, we have to wait 6 months, we have to start, but at the end of 4 years, for example, we are in a project on the use of cobot. They say, okay, we have $500,000 of fund by Horizon 2020, but at the same time in US we found companies that have already do this and they are already on the market. So we have to find a way to speed up innovation, to give the possibility to all young talent to create company, to create value. Because otherwise we are going to fail, because this is an opportunity, need investment, but need also to bring on the market some product. So that is the idea. The startup, like I said before, US, after 2 years, they have 40, 70 people that work on that, some Italian that go there to work. But they create a startup, they can grow a lot, they are funded by DARPA, that is, they invest, and it's easier to find money, easier to create company, and maybe also to fail, but is a manner also to keep here in Europe talent, and also to permit to the talent to develop their capability. Otherwise, we are going to lose this opportunity.
Francesca, do you want to react?
Yeah, sure. I think it's first of all very positive that we do feel it that there is let's say a renewed focus on industry in Europe and particularly on the new technologies and how to really deploy them on large scale across Europe. So that's, I would say, very encouraging. At the same time, perhaps I see two main concern or risk in relation to those developments. One, I think, is the disconnect, or let's say the unpreparedness of manufacturing to deal with all of this. So I'm here representing a multinational company, so we're not even talking about the SMEs. And Dana, you listed the amount of proposals and initiatives that will come to our desk. And as I mentioned before, I'm trying to keep pace with those developments, but it's true that even in industry fora, of course the tech companies are there in big presence. I struggle to find people from manufacturing industry around those tables. So that's our own, let's say, self-criticism, if I may say so, but it's also more than criticism, is really even having, let's say, the internal resources to devote to the assessment of all these policy and regulatory changes, which will impact our operations directly. So I think that can also lead to another problem, which is are these new tools and new regulation really be the right one to address B2B related issues? Clearly there is a lot of focus on B2C, particularly when we talk about ethics, AI and data, and we had some example, if I think of the e-privacy proposal regulation and the machine communication provision. That is where I think probably was the moment when industry started to say perhaps these things concern us as well, and we should actually understand how they might impact actually then the use of data and machine on the shop floor very, very practically. So I think it's on both sides that we, and I'm talking largely as manufacturing, clearly the big players, the one that provide the cloud system or the machine are probably a lot more equipped than I would call it the average manufacturing company. So I think that's something where we both need to invest, but I think also the legislator and the policymaker, let's say, need to pay an eye on whether we're present enough on those tables, or find a way to make us more involved in this process. And the other, I would say, potential risk is again looking at the industrial strategy approach, and the focus has been put on that by the new Commission. It's again very, very important, very refreshing, and there is clearly a clear goal of supporting competitiveness and innovation, So the other side of the coin will the regulation and policy approach that will come on AI and let's say technological developments at large support that, or could potentially become an element, an obstacle to that advancing of innovation. So what I'm trying to say is that I think it's important that the rules retain some flexibility, that they are not over-prescriptive. Again, because what we were saying at the beginning, we don't know where this process will lead us, so we are learning, is a process in the making. So I think it's important that we retain specific flexibility and also look at the specificity of the sector. I was talking before about the data sharing across the supply chain. If you look at the aerospace sector, it's one situation. If you look at automotive, it's a very different one. And so I think that's also important to make sure that those specificities are taken into account. And last point perhaps on the incentives, I was just thinking about the training, let alone investment in actual incentives to support investment in technologies. And even there, I think there is a bit of limitation, even though everybody's talking about the importance of upskilling and reskilling. There are no real programs out there, models that you can use, and also incentive schemes to support those. And yeah, so I think that would be an important area where it's important to give the incentives and also to support the best practice sharing across industry. And larger industry can perhaps be helpful also for the network of SMEs in their cluster area.
Thank you very much. Dana, maybe you have a response for that, because it's true that there's a lot of data that's captured by industry. We're talking about digital twins, and at the same time there seems to be this issue of how do we share that data, is that even possible? What is the Commission trying to do in enabling that, to make sure companies can tap into the data and use it better?
Yeah. As I said, we are working on the issue of data spaces, creating practically European data spaces, but of course there needs to be rules and conditions about that. I cannot say more. Stay tuned, more will be disclosed in 2 weeks' time, practically. But what I would like to mention as well is that you mentioned the speed and simplification of the processes is a continuous concern of the European Commission. I'm not personally working in Horizon and research projects, but I know it's a continuous dialogue on how to simplify the process, but again, keep it robust because it's public money that are at stake, so and we are accountable for that. But I believe the message is very clear. We simplify to find mechanisms to make it the most easily and quickly available, but of course in a secure and safe way. But what I would like to mention is also the issue of skills that you very rightly mentioned. It's not only the skills that are coming from the university, so the new generation of very smart kids, but it's what we do with the workforce, the 50-something or even earlier that are in the automotive industries, that they were doing one task or their lives, and now suddenly this will be victim of automation or of artificial intelligence. And therefore we will announce in the skills agenda that will be coming later on in March, the European Pact for Skills. And practically what I can say is that we wish indeed to work very close with industry. We see a clear role of industry players, especially manufacturing, in the reskilling of their workforce. And they need to be supported by that. We are not yet, and more will come of course with the skills agenda, but we are thinking of solutions of how to, for example, earmark certain funds, social funds or regional development funds for reskilling purposes. And there, it is not something that will be done. It will be something that will be done in partnerships with academia, not only higher education. The vocational training institutions will have a key role on this one, but also industry. And of course governments, member states and the European Commission, and this will be a major part of our future work. And again there I would again mention that if big companies have issues with reskilling the workforce, what about small and medium enterprise? So we have to find a scheme that small and medium enterprises find support as well, and not only at, let's say, industry and SME level. We see also the need for reskilling at local, so cities, or regional level. So many cities are starting to get up own initiatives for reskilling of their citizens in order to prepare their citizens and find the skills that the industry needs. So we see indeed a huge mobility in this area, and we plan to readjust our instruments to cover these needs.
Thank you. Rob, I wanted to ask you to go further into the implications of automation on the labor market, because clearly this is a concern that we hear a lot when it comes to AI manufacturing, and I know you've worked a lot on the topic.
Yeah, as politicians do, they they answer the question that they want to answer, and not that question they were asked. So, just the short answer. I don't think this. I really don't think that this particular issue is a big labor market issue in the sense of what Dario is really talking about. A lot of this is it's better customization, it's faster, it's better quality. This is not a robotics agenda, which is much more about automation and. This is different. This is about better linkages and players. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't mean to sound callous. I think, sure we need to train workers and all, but I think what this is really all about is making sure that European firms have world-class capabilities to move from level 1 to level 5. Because once you get to level 5, you can be global leaders. But I just want to say two important factors, I should say. One is, if you look at all the companies we surveyed, and you listen to Dario, and Dario, big company, I don't know, big for Italy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, for Italy, but for US we are.
You're done.
Yeah.
Right. But even EMA and all these companies we surveyed, they're having a difficult time doing this. And I think it's frankly the way this new technology system. I think we've just got to be realistic about it. It's not going to, small enterprises are not going to be driving this. And I think this notion that we should be focusing on small enterprises is frankly misguided. It's going to be mid-sized enterprises. The technology is so complicated and you need such scale that I really think it's going to be mid-sized enterprises and big enterprises obviously that drive this. I mean, you look at Italy, a recent study on Italy. Why has Italy done so badly? Because their average manufacturing size, I think, is like 3, or something. It's just like teeny.
Yes, personal.
Teeny. And, that worked back in the 60s and the 70s, even the 80s. It doesn't work now, not with China. You have to have scale. And that doesn't mean, big, giant monopolist behemoths, but it does mean that scale really matters. There's a recent commission data set that we looked at when we wrote a report a year and a half ago on EU productivity. The average productivity of a small firm in Europe is about less than half of a big firm. They just aren't very productive, and so I think that's one thing. The second thing would be really around data, and I think we really need to be super careful. I was visiting another firm in Bologna. I visited EMA. Just to me, it's mind blowing. I don't know how you do this stuff. It's like you take this thing and it comes out the other end. It's crazy. But I visited another firm, and sort of like that, they were a machine builder. And one of the things they were wanting to do is create digital twins of all their machines in real time around the world. So they know exactly what's happening to every single machine that they've sold. And why do they want to do that? They want to do it for 2 reasons. One, as Dario alluded to improve their machines so that oh man, this thing isn't working right so well. But the second thing is to give real-time feedback to their customers to say, by the way, your machine's only operating at 89% and everybody else is on an average of 92. You might want to think about that. So the only way that happens is if that company and EMA and other companies have the ability to enter into contracts free from rules, really, just contracts with their customers. And I think that's going to be the most important thing that drives this. And so I've heard, and I have no idea whether, I've just heard that there's possibility of saying, well, no, wait a minute, we want to regulate that and limit what companies can do in terms of their data contracts. And I would be very skeptical of that, because ultimately what you want is all these great European machine builders to be able to collect data and use it to build and sell and operate better machines around the world. And the last part of that is it's really around the world. I mean, you sell your machines in, what, 50,
all over the world,
100
yes.
countries?
I think 60, 70 countries.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is, yes, and 95% of the turnover is abroad.
Yeah, yeah. And so you're going to want to be able to take data from some machine in Canada and analyze it. And you know, I get your point, Dana. I thought, but most of this is anonymous. It's just a machine, you know, doing something. But sometimes you're going to want the machine operator data attached to it. Because, you know, Fred is operating the machine and Sally, and Fred's doing worse than Sally, you want to know that. And so that can be PII, and we just need to make sure that that level of global data flows, or even within that, in our view, would need to be protected.
Thank you. And we haven't even talked about
Can I just
interoperability.
jump
Sure.
on
Then
that?
I need to react.
Because, no, I think that's a really valid point. I mean, the personal data involved in all of this as well, from the operators, and we already have obstacles with that in terms of, you know, the existing data privacy rules. So that in itself is already an element which is slowing down innovation at site level. So I think that's certainly something that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Concerning the focus on small and medium enterprises, we cannot avoid focusing on small and medium enterprises, although you make the distinction small and medium. For us, they are in a basket, but they are 99% of the European economy. So that's, and many in the manufacturing sector, many in the automotive industry, they are not only the OEMs, only the manufacturers of the cars, there is the whole supply chain, and they are mostly small and medium enterprises. So it's unavoidable to focus on them in Europe. But we fully agree with you that you need scale. Only the scale in Europe needs to be different from the scale in the other part of the Atlantic. For example, that's why actually we came up with the idea of the strategic value chains, to build scale. So small and medium enterprises that are in similar domains, that the one fits the other in a chain, whether we can make them become alliances, okay, rivals, but also alliances in a certain part, in order to create scale and find smart ways to share their data to the extent, of course, that they need to be shared, taking into account all, you know, what can be disclosed, what is core competitive data for the business that need to be kept, etc. We are also on the regulation part, because you made reference to the GDPR. There was a years-long discussion about the GDPR before it was adopted. There was a lot of criticism that this will kill innovation and everything. Once the GDPR was adopted, which I personally, and those are personal views, I agree that this was a burden for companies, and especially small and medium enterprises. But once it was adopted, many companies, including American companies, came back to us and they said, yeah, at least there are clear rules, so we abide by them, and then we do that at a global level. And I have to say, if these rules were there, we wouldn't be able to have a Cambridge Analytica scandal in Europe because of the GDPR. Coming to the SMEs and the dynamism of the SMEs, I would like to remind that many startups, brilliant startups, I will only mention Skype, you all know, Spotify, DeepMind, they're all European startups. They all ended up on the other part of the Atlantic to business. This is what we should take care now. How to make sure that the brilliant minds that are brilliant to start companies here stay and grow here. And this is again how we link with the strategic value chain. So the model we have in mind practically, to simplify things, is a more distributed model where value is distributed and is closer to where it is being created, rather than captured by some big high-tech companies alone.
Thank you very much. I think I'd like to turn to the audience now in case you have questions and answers. Please raise your hands. Yes, a couple here. I think we have a mic. So. Thank you.
Thank you for... Oh, it's not working. Maybe now? No? Okay, do you hear me like this?
Yes.
Okay, it's fine. First, thank you very much for all the questions that you brought to the table. I think the discussion was very productive. My name is Katerina Jordanova from KU Leuven Center for IT and IP Law. And actually, I would like to ask you something that we didn't discuss today. And it's something that was brought to me by one of the projects that we work on together with Airbus actually, and it's a H2020 project about smart manufacturing in particular. And what we find particularly challenging from a legal point of view is the accountability. This is not something new for manufacturing, of course, but when you put the layer of the data supply chain on top of the traditional manufacturing, from a legal perspective, it becomes a complete mess. So I'm personally very interested if the Commission, first of all, is planning something in the area of mandatory due diligence, because it was raised during the questioning of the commissioners in, I believe, 3 domains, in justice and trade as well. And also because of the recast of the dual-use regulation, it really envisions new due diligence for technologies. And also I'm interested how companies are dealing with this. How do you see this business and human rights challenge? How do you do this impact assessment, even in from environmental point of view? Or this is just another buzzword that's for the HR to deal with in terms of corporate social responsibility? Thank you.
Thank you for your forthcoming comment. Anyone want to react to this? Dana?
I will have to go back and consult with colleagues. That was too technical for me. I do not have this information.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now, for myself, if I well understood the question, so that you ask when we talk about smart manufacturing and we talk about data, so the idea is like Dana said before, is to share the added value. It's here that beside, apart of the capacity to catch data, so means to have a machine with a system that permit to collect data, permit software that permit to have anomaly detection, predictive maintenance, etc. But we need also to create a team that work on that. So there is a cost. Plus, I think, like Dana said before, data have to come by all the supply chain, all the value chain, because we can collect the data from the machine, but the data can come from the quality control of the company, can come by the technology provider that are on the machine. So we have in all the value chain, we have different point where we can catch data. So the idea is to increase the value that we can create and that they have the capability to share this added value. So normally the contract that we have is very difficult. Now our contract just we still with multinational try to, because cybersecurity is a big limit, but is very important to consider. But apart that, manufacturing data are belong by the one that own the machine, and we can provide a service. So we find a value for the service that is cost for personal people, and also the other value that we have to share. That is my vision. So I don't see so many barriers.
Just quickly say, at least from our perspective, our general sort of guidelines when we think about this and talk to policymakers is you start with the assumption that you don't need new rules. That AI is, we didn't have spreadsheet rules in the US. We didn't have a spreadsheet regulation. You know, it's a new technology. And we adapted existing rules and regulations. And I think the same thing is true with AI. So I'd be, without knowing more, I guess, but I'd be quite skeptical of sort of mandatory due diligence. If Dario's company sells a machine to somebody and it breaks because it's got a bad cam on it, no difference than if it breaks because it's got a bad AI algorithm on it. It's the same thing.
Thank you. I think there was another question.
Yes, good morning, and thank you very much for the conference. I am Anis Naji from Industrial Engineering News, and my question is for all the panel here. During this conference, I've been said that more data, more qualified and valuable data can help, for example, reduce energy consumption. and also that skills, finance, and are some of the biggest challenge we will face. But these considerations address another challenge. So my question is, how can we store this increasing amount of data in a cost-efficient and energy-efficient way?
Thank you very much. Any takers?
So, first of all, most of the data that's created in the world isn't really data. It's I went to CES, whatever it was, a Consumer Electronics Show, and then everybody showing 8K TVs. So I just bought a 4K TV, which has, what is it, 8 times more data than the HD, and an 8K is going to have, like, 8 times, 20 times more. That's not really data, that's just pixels. The data, I mean, Dara, you know more than I, the data requirements here aren't super big. One thing I'll add is we wrote a report recently called The Policymakers Guide to the Tech Clash, and our energy team looked at this question. And one of the things that people, I didn't know about it, there's been, if you know what Moore's Law is, Moore's Law of doubling the processing power, Moore's Law has been occurring consistently in IT and energy. So the efficiency, for example, of a smartphone, an LTE, the efficiency of that compared to the last version, they're like twice as efficient in terms of using energy. 5G is going to be twice as efficient as 4G. We see that with chip generations and all. So it's not to say that companies, can't do more, but the natural progression in IT is, and in cloud centers and in machines, it is towards more and more energy efficiency use, and energy efficiency.
Yeah, on my perspective, that was a very good question, because we use sometimes to have only one side of the coin. Indeed, artificial intelligence and data management will consume a lot of power, because they require a huge computing power as well. But they will also help with optimizing the energy assumption. For example, you must all know by now, Google is known to say that already they managed to have 40% less energy consumption for maintaining their data centers because of artificial intelligence use. Of course, they will need more and more energy because of storing and exploiting the data, the huge amount of data that will be doubling every year actually. But also we are reflecting about another option that is upcoming, which is related to the edge computing. A lot of energy is consumed in sending data to the cloud, retrieving data from the cloud, and having these long transfers, which actually are not operational also for applications like the autonomous car. It will never be enough the time that you will have to get your data up and down, plus the energy consumption. So we're thinking of this model of edge computing where practically more and more data will stay and will be, let's say, calculated at the local level where they are produced, and then only a type of metadata, so a much smaller part with all the intelligence will go up to the cloud to influence the whole variety of data sets over there. So I would like to mention that the combination of these two solutions, we hope that will lead us to indeed a development that will be also a green deployment of AI.
Well, I mentioned at the beginning that really at plant level it's very important to improve our own energy consumption, better use of the data. Clearly, we're all aware of the challenge also of the energy efficiency improvement needed for the storage of this data, the process of the data. But I think that should be the barrier to say, well, we're not going to do it, right? And again, what will be the solution? Technology and innovation to make sure that those data clouds become more and more efficient, and putting investments there. And I think the European Commission is going to address that as well, and making sure that operators invest in those areas as well. But yeah, so it shouldn't be a limitation to do it.
Yes, if you want, I can say just to think, but also I have a story about that. But after, yes, from a machine, it's clear that if we take data every 1 millisecond, when we talk about real time, for us is 1 millisecond, for a plant could be every 5 minutes, but should be some megabyte per minute. It's clear that it's not convenient machine. Usually they work for 30 years, 24 hours a day. They produce a lot of product. So the idea is like if what we try to do is to filter the data, because if I take a picture every 1 millisecond of your face, maybe yes, I don't have to store all the picture. So the idea is to store just the pictures that are different. So that is the idea, to reduce the quantity of data that we have to store. The idea is to use, like for car, to use the edge technology, so have a computer or in the line, only in the machine that can filter, and have maybe, if we need something on the cloud for artificial intelligence, we can do an analysis in a second time. So that is the idea. So it's clear that if you look, instead to check just the machine, but if you want to have a fingerprint of the single product, that is possible to do, you need to store a lot of data, because in this case you can go to work on all the value chain and have all the data that can represent the single product. So that could be quite difficult and will be necessary to create KPI on that.
Thanks very much for your answers. Any more questions from the audience? We still have a couple of minutes. No? You're being very polite. So I did have one question to ask you, Dana, if I may, because I know that the Product Liability Directive and the Machinery Directive, they're more or less part of what's going on at policymaking level here. So maybe you could update us on that.
Yeah, not much to say there. Of course, those two directives that you mentioned, they are there for many years. It is the liability and the safety directive for every machinery that goes, in the market. So it's clear that the liability, if there is an accident, for example, because of a defective machine, this goes to the manufacturer. Now, my colleagues who are working in these directives, they are of course taking into account that those machines are not simply mechanical machines now, but they are practically all now AI empowered. So, and usually the software also is updated often. So the machine is not exactly the one that you get when it is empowered and you upload new software. There are many open questions like whose liability would that be then if an autonomous car will have an accident? Would that be the software? Would that be the communication provider? Would that be the manufacturer of the car? They are looking into this. There are expert groups. What I know is that there is a revision. Well, they are exploring the need for a revision of the machinery and the liability directive. But in parallel, there are many high-level expert groups and dialogues that they are seeing whether additional regulation will be needed. To my understanding and to my knowledge, there is not a clear cut yet on this.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're actually doing very well on time. Still, if there's one more question. Yes, there is. Please.
I have just a small question on, you all spoke about how AI and data collection and so on is so important. All this part where you have to collect, store, and compute data to produce AI with algorithms, how do you see the operation of that part? Who will be able to operate and take control of these different value-added production for all these strategic value chains? How do you see that going? Because we've seen in the past that,
For me,
I mean, all of you, you've seen in the past that it's been a lot through concentration and winner takes all, like with very big giants in the US or in China. How do you see this going in Europe?
maybe I can start and then. Yeah, there are many interest groups in this one. First of all, there are public data. Let's start with the easy part. There are, for example, sensors. More and more cities are putting sensors to control traffic, air pollution, criminality, etc. Those are public data. There it is very clear we have already since years the Open Data Directive. So practically whatever is public data or public funded data should be open to other players to trigger more innovation and more business opportunities. But the situation is more complex when it goes to manufacturing data, because there you have also private data. So indeed machine collected data, but that belong or are happening in aeroplanes, for example, as you mentioned before. There it becomes much more complex, and it needs to be a partnerships with public, private, academia organizations to see what are the rights, how you open this data. Airbus was very courageous, I would say. It's a very good example, the Skywise example that you mentioned. Open the data to the whole supply chains, to citizens, I don't know as well. It's a model that I know is under discussion whether it can be applied in other sectors, for example, and in with what conditions, because data is money, so you cannot simply free all the data. So yeah, I see that in a way of public-private partnerships, and indeed finding a framework. We need to establish a framework on how we encourage and allow access to this data.
Thank you.
If I can add, it's clear that if you think a machine that that create data, we have to create a database. And the database, on the database we have to have an ontology, and we have to create the condition to use the data. Up to now, the platforms that are on the market are American. I think that AWS, Amazon Web Service, is the one that gives the best of the tool. So that could be the first part. Second part, if we create, we follow with the API gateway, with we can say the API economy. So we give the possibility to show the data, and so in this case we have to create the condition for someone that wanted to use data, keep this API and use to analyze data, collecting data from the machine, but for all other database to create a value. In this case, I think we created the condition to share the data and also assisted to create revenue, because who has the data lake and prepare the data lake to can use the data can have a revenue by the use of data. But up to now, I think that we need a lot of tool, and Amazon Web Service is the best. A lot of companies still moving on that, but also Azure or other big provider do that. So they create the can say the ecosystem to manage the data and create value by data from the data.
I would just, I think, you know, I was pleased to hear Dana's point about the Commission moving on from concerns about some of the big American tech companies. And to me, it's sort of striking. It's kind of like if you're a country that's super good at what we would call soccer, you would call football, but you're terrible at basketball, and all you do is you spend your time going, why am I terrible at basketball? It's like, no, you're great at soccer. You should be spending your time, how am I going to be greater at soccer? And to me, Europe is great at manufacturing. It's super strong. And I'm really glad to see that now, that new focus. It's like, boy, we could be we're already world class, but we can take it to that next level. What I would, so I think in that space, I mean, Dara's point about AWS or Azure, they're not really storing, I mean, they might have data there, but it's encrypted data. They don't, Amazon cannot access that data. They're completely private. The way AWS works, they don't read the data, they don't analyze it. They're just selling tools. And so I really think in this space, this is not going to be a GAFA play. It's just not. I was talking to a company recently, and this goes to Dario's original point about one of the reasons the U.S. is doing as well in this space. There are just so many startups that are just out there trying to get customers to do this. And so one interesting company I ran across recently is a company in Silicon Valley called Farmers Business Network. And it's a venture-backed company in the valley, Silicon Valley. And its business model is to have partnerships with farms or farmers, take all their data, run analytics on it, and give them back real value. And the farmers will pay for that because it's like, and they can't do it. They're, you know, in some individual farmer going to run data analytics. I think it'd be really a mistake to somehow say in the U.S., you know, the government's going to regulate that relationship, or the government's going to force that farm data into some common pool. Because if they do that, the business model for this company, Farmers Business Network, just goes away. They have no business model anymore. And so I think that one of the things, that I understand the notion of public-private partnerships. I think they're important. I would just encourage those to be voluntary. Companies, in lots of cases, will want to share their data in various things. You see that in medical. I mean, you see it in drugs now, interesting, in the U.S. There's a lot of drug companies, biopharmaceutical drug developers that say, you know, if we all share our data in a common pool, we can all do better. But I wouldn't want that to be mandated. I think it's better for the government to facilitate that, to help that along. But at the end of the day, if you tell IMA, that you have to give your data over to the university, it's like, I don't know what you're going to do.
Thanks very much. Please give our panelists a range of applause. Thank you. And thank you all for joining. And you can keep up with us online following our Twitter handle @DataInnovation. And I'm very excited that we're having our AI conference organized at the end of March. So thank you for following our work, and I will see you at the next event. Thank you.